Hi, welcome to the Culture Curators Podcast. We're here to share insights, information, and resources to help you become a more effective salon and business leader.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Culture Curators Podcast. We are excited for today's episode, and this is around why 50% commission doesn't work. If you are an owner and you're paying 50% or more in commission, we're going to help you understand why that's hurting your bottom line.
Absolutely. I think we're going to talk a little bit about different commission structures, what's doable for a business, what will help you to be profitable. When I say profitable, I don't mean like you're making 50% profit in your business. That's not realistic. But also paying out 50% to your service providers is not realistic either. So we're going to dive deep into that.
Well, if you're making 50% profit, I'd love you to call me and help me understand how to do that.
You should be doing this podcast.
You got your own podcast, because that would be a miracle in the hair world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I lost my train of thought. Where were we? Okay.
Just keeping it real.
Yes, exactly. So when we talk about commission, I think it's really important to start. A lot of us were commission-based workers, right? And I think for me, I want to share how my thinking has evolved from employee to owner. I think wherever we typically are is where our consciousness clearly is, right? And I think a lot of times, even people that were former employees, once they become an owner, especially after an extended period of time, and the further like being an employee is removed from your mind, you start to go into this mindset that you forget what it was like to be an employee. You forget how you thought at that time. And now it's all about how you think as an owner. Right. So when I was an employee, I thought I deserved more than 50% at one point in my career. I had worked for someone for a really long time. I viewed it as a, not even a reward. I thought that I earned it, that I deserved it. And that owner never fully understood the correct structure of how to build profit. And because of that, never clarified or explained to me why the commission structure needed to be what it was, probably because she didn't understand it herself.
Right.
And so when I left that salon, I was making 60% commission. And it was a 60-40 deal. When I look back on that, I didn't realize how amazing of a deal that was for me, but how much that hurt her and how that ended up being the downfall, and it could be the downfall for so many of our businesses if we're over commissioning, and especially so many salons are over commissioned and underpriced. It's just a recipe for disaster at the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes we hear our coaching clients say that, oh my gosh, someone with experience came in and they said they had a clientele. And so I did give them 60% commission. And even if they do have a clientele, even if they do have all this experience, you still are not setting up the culture and your business for success if you do go outside the lines. In other words, pay somebody more than what your structure is. So I think that that's where our starting point is. There's different types of commissioned salons. So you can pay a straight commission, which means no matter what I do, I get the same amount regardless. If it's 50%, 40%, whatever it is. You can have a sliding scale commission structure, which means that based on the amount of service dollars I bring in, I will get a certain percentage. So let's just, for an example, say I bring in $2,000 for the week. Maybe the first $1,000 I'm going to get 45% of. Then maybe the next $1,000 I'm going to get 48% of. So that's what I mean when I talk about a sliding scale. And then you could have an hourly rate where you're just paid an hourly rate. It does not matter how much services or volume you bring in, you're just going to have an hourly rate. And within the tiered system or sliding scale system, there's many different variations as well.
Yeah, I was just also going to say too, you could have a sliding scale where you're paid off of each increment like you mentioned, or it could just be a straight where, okay, 2,000 I get this percentage. Once I'm over 2,000, all of it, now I get that percentage.
Right. And in addition to that, some salons set it up so maybe I'm a level 1 and I get a certain percentage. Then I'm a level 2 and my percentage goes up, then I'm a level 3 and it goes up. So there's a lot of different ways when I'm talking sliding scale or varying commission structures. There's a lot of different ways to set it up. So that's why we thought it was a really valuable topic to come on here today and talk about.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about why 50% doesn't work, we're talking about a straight commission of 50%, meaning no matter what they bring in, you're giving them 50%. And I want you to think about that. If you're doing straight commission, 50% and above, right? So if you're giving 51% or even higher, then obviously if 50 doesn't work, 51 and above doesn't work either, right? So when you're talking about straight commission for simplicity purposes here, because you got to think about when you're doing a sliding scale, you have to take the average of what the commission is off of that scale, and that's your real-time commission to that person. So that can be a little bit more complex, and it's a little bit more numbers based and a little bit more math. It's not, impossible to understand, but it's just a little bit more complicated. So if we think a straight commission at 50%, I want to talk about why you giving 50% to the team member, it does not actually equal 50% coming right back to you.
Boy, isn't that the truth? Because here's the reality. You pay out 50% of the service dollars brought in. Now, in addition to that 50%, you need to pay the employer tax portion. You need to pay for the supplies. And we haven't even talked about any kind of a product deduction or anything like that. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to just touch on that. So if you're paying for the supplies, you're paying for the employer taxes, you're paying for the benefits. It could be that you pay 50% of medical, it could be the legalities of paid time off, etc. Suddenly that 50% could be more like 60% or higher. So now we're really in trouble.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we aren't running a nonprofit organization, or the goal is not to run a nonprofit organization. The goal is to have a little bit of at least profit at the end of the day. And if you're paying out all of that to your service providers and to the different entities that you need to in order to keep legal and in order to supply what they need to do their job, you're running out of money.
We haven't even talked about also if you supply support staff to your team.
Oh my gosh,
So
right?
those support staff people are hourly based workers. They're not bringing in any level of income yet, right? Let's say it's someone that's front desk support. Let's say it's an assistant, especially if you're based in this part of the country. We're here today recording in New York, where Jill is based out of in Minnesota. It's much more uncommon to have assistants, not unheard of. I just mean in New York, especially in this part of the country, it's just an expectation. Your stylists have an expectation that they're not going to do their own shampoo. And I don't necessarily think that that's a great thing. I'm just telling you kind of how it is. And you can also then obviously create whatever environment and culture you create. And even myself, I've had to kind of adjust and change that because it's really interesting. Even when we came back from the pandemic after we were shut down, the team expected more support staff, not less. And of course, they're not taking into account in their mind, even though we think as owners, like, how could you not take this into account? Well, it's because it's not their business. Well, we just had 3 months where we didn't bring in any income and we paid rent. So now we're coming back into business at a deficit. So to then add more support staff, especially when you were in certain parts of the country that were maybe 50%, occupancy rules,
Right.
that really hurt the bottom line that much more. And if you were overcommissioned at that time, think about how much your business is putting out. And now we even start talking about what your rent is.
Right? All of your expenses, when you look at your profit and loss statement and you roll down that whole long list of all of your expenses, that adds into it too. So all the dollars that are coming in, what you pay out is critical to it. And it all kind of wraps around into one. And so when we're looking at compensation and we're looking at why 50% doesn't work, I think you're starting to get and to see the picture now. If there's any service providers that are watching, I'm sure they're not happy with this message. However, if your business closes and they don't have a place to perform their services, they're not going to be happy either. So I think that there's an education process that goes along with it, and it's a different topic and it's a different podcast around, commission isn't the only thing that goes into compensation, and we'll touch on that later on. But for now, let's talk about, how do we know what is the right commission structure for our team?
What do you think?
I think that it's based on a lot of things and a lot of math. And I know that we're not mathletes, and I know that that's not exactly the greatest subject for us. I think that you need to align yourself with a business coach. And I'm not saying it's us, I'm saying it's someone out there who has done it, who knows the formulas, and who can guide and direct you into the right avenue. So you're looking at your overall expenses. What are all your overall expenses? And then you have to do a lot of formulations in a lot of scenarios. So if I'm going to have a sliding scale and say it's going to be based on level, so the higher the level you get, the more commission structure you're going to get, then we're going to be able to start to determine what's our starting point and what's the cap. And another part of it is, you always want to be bottom heavy in that kind of a scenario. So I always want to have more, say, level 1, whatever you want to call them. They could be entry level stylists, they could be a stylist. I'll just call them level 1 for simplicity's sake. They're going to have the lowest percentage of commission, but you may have the most of them as employees. Level 2, level 3, level 4. So in other words, what I'm saying is, you may start out a level 1, I'm just making this up right now, at 42% commission. And your highest level, maybe your level 5, maybe that's the highest level you have in your organization, may be at 49%. As Derek talked about earlier, you have to take the entire payroll, and you have to take all the service dollars coming in, not the retail in addition, but just the service dollars coming in, divide that by the payroll that you sent out, and that's going to tell you your overall percentage.
Right, your
and
average
your
commission.
average commission payout per payroll.
Yes, and if you're in a situation where you're paying, straight 50% or straight 55% or whatever across the board, then that's what your average is. In Jill's scenario that we're talking about, if you're paying some 40 this and some 40 that and some closer to 50, well, the average of that is what really the payroll commission is across the board for the salon itself. And Jill touched on this before, but there are also other commission structures where you might have a certain percentage, but then there is what we call a product deduction or a deduction fee taken off the top. Now, you need to check with your state to see if that's legal, or how the verbiage needs to be stated to the employee so that they're clear that they're getting X percentage off of, so for instance, if you have a 10% deduction, they're getting 50% of the 90% that they're bringing in. And I know that might sound a little confusing, but work with me for a moment, right? Let's take this in kind of a bite-sized chunk. If you have 100% of the service dollars coming in and you're taking a 10% deduction off the top, well, now there's 90% left. Whatever now commission percentage you're giving them, it's off of that 90, not off of the entire 100. So you need to make sure that if you are doing that the employee understands why it's that way, and then it's clarified clearly for them and legally for your state.
Right. It's really critical that you get that and that you seek legal advice on that, because I know that you can't do a product deduction in my state, but you can accommodate it. One of the ways in which you accommodate it is exactly what Derek said. You're paying them 40-something% commission off of 90% of the total service dollars that you're bringing in. Another way to state that is to, just as we go to resorts, there's a resort fee, right? So another way to do that is that there is a salon fee or a client fee or a product fee, whatever you want to call it, and it's 10%, and that's just a separate charge to the client. I will say that we did do that, and we got a lot of questions about it from clients. It wasn't something that was normal, I'll say, back when we did it. And so we decided to change that out and do it a different way. And so you have to be careful. And I find it really interesting. We go to a resort and there's a resort fee. We were just in a resort this past weekend at a show. There was a resort fee. We don't think twice about a resort fee, but our clients coming in, if they see a salon fee or a guest fee, whatever you call it, there's a question around it. Probably some of that has to do with the fact that that's not what they've been brought up. They haven't seen that. It's something new. And so they're questioning it. And of course, they don't like it because they're seeing it as they're having to pay more potentially for their service.
Yeah, I think sometimes in those scenarios too, because it's some large resort, it's like this big entity that is like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain that you can't like kind of complain to. But when it's a small business, they're looking at you directly in the eye as the owner, like, why are you charging this? So it's a little bit different. It's almost, I always say this too, not to get too off topic, but we walk into a restaurant, we know that all of the alcohol is marked up 1,000%. Like, we're happy to pay, not happy, but we pay $18 in New York for a drink. We know that that bottle at the liquor store costs 22. So for the 1 ounce of a 32-ounce bottle, we just paid, a crazy percentage. So I just think it's what's the norm for, spending and what people are accustomed to. But really, when we're talking about commission, I think these kind of conversations a lot of time are confusing for the stylist, especially the young stylist. And what's really interesting is when you start to paradigm shift this conversation, we want to clearly explain what our commission structure is to the employee. And we also want to let them know they have unlimited earning potential. Unlimited earning potential. Now, you might say, well, how could we give them unlimited earning potential if we're going to cap them at, let's say, 45% or 48 or whatever the case may be? How can they earn more? Well, they can earn more simply by being able to raise the prices of their services. And if you go back to one of our episodes that was around raising prices and really one statistic that we call utilization, which is really based on supply and demand of your time, that's really where we can help stylists understand that if you do have a scale, or even if you just have a flat straight commission, if they've reached the top of that, well, this is how you can continue to actually earn more. So when I had stylists that were super young and first growing, maybe their haircut started at 65, and by the time they, ended up moving on from the salon and maybe going to do their own thing or work somewhere else, their haircut was 105. So that's how they've been able, even if, and their commission grew slightly through that incrementally. So even if they've reached the top of your commission scale, you need to show them how there's an unlimited earning potential based on their demand of their time. The more clients want their time, we'll continue to raise your prices until the numbers tell us not to.
Right, right. And I think that you said something really key. You said keep it simple. The last way that you can talk about this product deduction and implement it without getting yourself legally in trouble is to adjust the compensation or adjust the commission structure.
To just go straight.
So that you just have a commission. You don't have to deal with a product deduction. You don't have to deal with, you're going to get 90% of what you bring in, because that's a little negative. Let's face it. They don't get it. They're not mathletes. They don't understand it. So that's confusing. It's not simple. We've got the challenge with the client seeing that there's a salon fee or whatever you call it. That could be a little bit challenging. I think the simplest way is by adjusting the commission structure and doing away with 90% or the client service fee or whatever it is, because they can get it. And we want our employees to know how much they're going to get paid gross wise. We want them to be able to figure it out. So if I'm going to say I'm a level 1 and I'm going to get paid 42% commission off of $1,000, I can figure that out. I don't have to be like, a math scientist to figure it out. I can figure that out, and we want them to figure it out. We want them to be able to know what they're getting. We don't want it to be complicated, because when it's complicated, it's messy. And when it's messy, they don't understand it. And when they don't understand it, they really think you're ripping them off some way.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing. You don't want anyone to feel like you're doing something that's dishonest or that they're getting cheated out of something. Now, you might be asking, as we kind of start to wrap this episode up, you might be asking, well, what is the highest percentage I can go on average for everyone and still stay profitable?
Well, that's a $1 million question. And what I'll share with you in closing is that on our profit and loss statement, we do have total compensation. Now, when I say total compensation, I mean service providers, I mean assistants, I mean managers, everybody included at 48%. So we would love to help you figure that out for your individual circumstances in your individual salon. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to do a discovery call and take a look at your compensation and really share with you what's working, what's not, and what we could do to help improve that.
Yes, for sure. Now, I have one question before we close, because I'm thinking that if I'm listening to this, maybe I have a second question around what we just talked about or what you just said. So if we have an overall compensation percentage of 48% that includes your hourly workers also, what if we were to remove the hourly workers and it's only your stylist? What should that average percentage be?
48%. At the end of the day, 48%. How you cut the pie is up to you. At the end of the day, 48% all day, all night, 24/7.
Awesome. So I hope you gained some clarity for sure. This was a really good episode. I know a little bit of numbers talk can be a little bit confusing, but this is super important. If you are opening a salon or if you already open a salon, this is something you really need to dive deep into. And if you ever need any help, like Jill mentioned, reach out, ask us some questions, set up a discovery call. We're happy to help. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Culture Curators podcast. Please like, comment, follow, and subscribe.